is truly behaving. And once you feel you have an assessment of that, then the question becomes a predictive thing. Will they behave like that over here? Or is that good behavior? Is that not good behavior that you want on your team? And then there's the motivational theory. It looks at the motivation behind the individual's behavior to understand why they're behaving in a certain way. So a practical consideration, the most powerful question, it's a one-word question. Ask yourself why to get to the root of one's behavior. Relationship premise, people simply want to feel good, not only about themselves, about their contribution on the team. Hopefully things are going well, okay? And a lot of times as a leader, we fall trapped where we tend to perceive behavior of others through our own value system. Interesting point. So be aware of gratification others seek from you as a leader. Okay? Understand why they act the way they do. Simple, practical considerations. Again, rewards need to fit the person, not you, the giver, the receiver. And if a reward is based on your value rather than theirs, it's not going to have a positive effect. And more often than not, whether it be money, letter of recognition, a simple pat on the back to say, hey, Joe, thank you for a job well done. That could be priceless. Okay, how to strengthen relationships. Okay, stakeholders, for example, are very, very important, critical to the success of your project. Okay, be aware, foster a trusting, working relationship. You're not there as a project leader to make a friend. Interesting point. I'll say it again. You're not there to make a friend. Now, if over time you create a friendship, that's icing on the cake. But you are there as a project leader to work together, foster a relationship to accomplish a common goal, the desired outcome of the project. So you need to understand, exchange, resolve conflicts, negotiate, influence some of the things I touched upon earlier. So it's very, very important you're focused on achieving the project results. So now let's transition. Now that we established that baseline, let's call it, of leadership, of relationships, now let's transition and build upon that in terms of communication. And I like to call it effective communication. This is a simple cartoon that I got a kick out of. I wanted to share with you, where the doctor is telling the assistants, quote, and that is why we lift on 3. What happened? There was a breakdown of communication and the patient is falling on the floor. So the background. The most common complaints in life is lack of communication, whether it be a teacher, a student, a marriage, a parent, a child, a coach, an athlete. But as a project manager, you want to lead by example, knowing that you're never going to be perfect. There's always room for improvement. But to improve, effectively communicating in a timely, accurate, complete manner to those that need to be communicated with. as you journey around that project lifecycle. According to Project Management Institute, project managers should spend 90% of their time communicating. You want to make sure you articulate the goals, the responsibilities, expectations, foster feedback, things to that nature. But yet you want to be present. You want to be available. You want to be engaged as that conductor with the baton. You want to make sure people are coming in and out accordingly when appropriately in that symphony sung. So team, this is what is called a two-way communication process. And the reason I have this here is it's simple, but yet it can apply not only one-on-one, one to many, or many to one. So what this means is the following. If you were to look at the person on the left, the sendor, that sendor has certain values, certain beliefs, certain interests, things of that nature. So that sendor on the left is going to send a message to the receiver on the right, who has potentially similar, but yet maybe different values, beliefs, etc. But here's the key. Filtering. Maybe that receiver only got half of what the sender sent. Maybe they didn't understand all of it, etc., etc. So now that receiver on the right is a sender to the person on the left who is now the receiver. Feedback, okay, through some type of medium, whether it be, virtual, whether it be on the phone, whether it be in person, doesn't matter. But this two-way process can apply for many, many different people. So, I put this here because this is very important, the way I like to paint, let's call it a spectrum. And what I mean by that is the following. If two people always agree, it's a sign that at least one of them isn't thinking critically or speaking candidly. Differences of opinion don't have to be a threat. They could be a tremendous opportunity for learning, for improving, for innovating. Intellectual friction isn't a relationship bug. It's a feature of education. And this gets back to what I was touching upon earlier. If you were to paint a spectrum, on the left side, intellectual curiosity, always asking, always being a sponge to learn, to improve, and subsequently share to those around you, then on the other side of the spectrum creates this intellectual friction where, is there area for improvement? Is there areas that we could be better, etc.? So team, I want you to think about, when you think about communicating, some of these concepts. So, as a project manager, okay, you eventually want to come up with what's called a communication management plan. And what is it? It organizes the actual process, the expectations on how, to whom, what, etc. is going to be communicated. Okay? And it includes the formatting, what content, how detailed. Okay? And it shows the information flow, the medium that you're going to use in communicating. Maybe there's a problem. That communication requires escalation, for example, to immediately all hands to fix that barrier, that showstopper in the project? What methods are going to be used to retrieve? How are they going to be updated? Things to that nature. So this team is a simple example of a communication management plan. Simplicity is a beautiful thing. So in this case, maybe a simple spreadsheet or simple Word document. You have the stakeholders or the key people on your team on the left, whether they be external or internal or both. How you're going to communicate, how often you're going to communicate with each individual, what their responsibility is, and anything that describes, say, their interests, their persona, what's important to them. Communication management plan example. If you're not using this currently as a project manager, I highly recommend it. I also recommend you share it across your team so they understand also. What's interesting here in this pie chart is what's called the breakdown of percentage on ways of communicating. And interestingly enough, the majority of communication is through non-verbal language. How many times have you been in a conference room where either you're leading the meeting in the conference room or you're a participant sitting in the conference room, and you look around the table, the behavior, facial expressions, their posture, etc., etc. It speaks volumes of what they're feeling. Nonverbal. So when you try to identify requirements, you're the eye in the sky. As the project manager, as the project leader, you want to make sure from a communication perspective, the why, the how, the what, the who, the where, and how often. All right? Make sure you try to understand that. And again, as PMI said, your biggest contribution to the team is effectively communicating. When you effectively communicate, back to that two-way communication example, you had a sender and you had a receiver. How was that which you sent received? Was it in the form, in this case, of Lego blocks in a pile? Was it filtered such that it was sorted or maybe somehow arranged? How was it mentally presented in their mind? And was the end state of the story you're trying to say, was it explained? Is it understood? Is it resonating? They clearly understand what you're said in that communication media. So it's the same number of blocks. The question is, how was it received? In what type of manner? I thought this would be a great example for you to consider. So, communication challenges, this list, as you can imagine, could go on and on and on. Understand nonverbal. Understand this thing called filters in one's mind. But yet, understand trusting that they understood what you told them, whether they agree with it or not. At least you understand where they stand on what you communicated. Very important. This is a simple, what I call a 4-step communication process to achieve team success, because it's the most important thing that you as a project leader need to do in a day in the life of the journey across the project life cycle. And basically, team, it says the following. You want to recognize and you want to understand the requirements of those around you. Who are they? Where are they? What's important to them? And in seeking that, you always want an open mind to make sure you understand. The second step is now to create some type of message and how you would message that to who needs to know that information. The way you message, say, a project status meeting is going to be different, for example, how you message, say, to stakeholders and how often you do that messaging. The medium of delivering the message. Okay? How much information? What is the minimum they want to know? Is it simply red, yellow, green to the sponsor? It's a green, everything is good, have a nice day, I'll communicate with you next week, as an example. And then last but not least, obtaining the feedback. Again, it's a two-way process to ensure you receive, you understand, especially if there's an issue. So, this is one of the first, I think, of two exercises, team, that I would like to do together, and we'll walk through this together. This particular exercise is a real-life case study on a hospital that's focused on effective communication and how they did effectively communicate to achieve project success. So let's walk through this. Just a couple of slides, because I feel this is an excellent example that could be applied to a day in the life of your project going forward. So what we're going to do, and what this team did, they applied this 4-step communication process. So let's begin with the background. It's a hospital system. They got 8 campuses. They span 2 states here in the United States. And these hospitals focus on health, heart health, long-term care, and education. So the project manager was put in place to manage a paperless project for doctors and nurses to now utilize a state-of-the-art wireless technology solution to improve overall patient care. So that desired outcome was not only to improve the care, but to streamline and to reduce paperwork, processes, etc., etc. So as this project was being kicked off, the project sponsor simply said, this project and its size, with a variety of stakeholders, unequivocally is going to require timely, accurate communication. The project manager assigned says, this will be my most important job, to effectively communicate. So let me show you what that means. Step 1, when you look at a healthcare system, this involved a cross-section smorgasbord of different entities, whether they be medical, technical, public, HIPAA with the insurance companies, the personnel departments, health and human services. It was unbelievable what was involved. So the project manager's initial task was to create a project team directory. Who is who? That communication plan concept I shared a few slides earlier. Their email, their phone numbers, their role, their position. And that team directory was placed on the hospital's network. So it could hopefully, right up front, bridge and bring everybody together based on their variety of locations that they represent. When you look at step 2 in this project initiative, it involved the network engineers, the wireless engineers, and a variety of those other people representing those variety of entities. But the what in here, in this step 2, the technical and medical staff, unfortunately, were segmented. And traditionally, they didn't work together, whether they wanted to or not. But very quickly, given this initiative to streamline, et cetera, they then realized quickly they need to work together to complete the mission of the project. So over time, this communication perspective helped to remove some of these silos so that collaboration across these entities began. And the when, in the initial phase, they went on to say it went well thanks to good planning and simulation, how we're going to potentially do this, okay? And once the first wireless system in the first campus was installed, the team began to monitor and report on the status to you, the project manager. And then what they wanted to do was to use this as a template by working with subject matter experts to create solutions to issues that surfaced from this first campus installation. So within 2 weeks, the story went on to say, the case study, that this system was up, functional, and served as a model that they could now replicate to the other locations within this health system. That then led to creating status reports, the communication management plan, like I talked about earlier, how the team was to interact, the expectations of the stakeholders, okay, the different types of methods so that that could be a common standard type of approach, the knowledge management system where they're going to store a lot of this so that anybody, anytime, could easily navigate to get and retrieve what they need to do. And then the why, again, you had a very astute project manager that knew if communication is going to be paramount. And that project manager early on addressed this communication plan to those that are involved in it. And then when you look at the communication plan, was based on the systems, the hospital systems template, so that they could have the same type of look and feel for the projects that were associated with this overall installation. They addressed the new requirements where the IT now is working more closely with the medical staff. Everybody relied on that directory. That was one of the first things I mentioned up front. Everybody is now buying in and contributing accordingly, again, triggered by that communication plan. And it focused on changing the culture. Think about that. When you look at the doctors, the nurses, the IT staff, this is a fairly profound cultural change. Okay, and they try to utilize a lot of the hospital's already existing systems, okay, for patient care. And then when you look at step 4, this is where it really comes together, and you're now seeing the value in terms of standards, improved policies, guidelines, paperless initiatives, okay, financial control, obviously making sure that a patient information is sound, secure, updated, etc. The assets obtained. So when you look at the conclusion that this case study summarized, unparalleled communication was clearly the key for this project's success. They took the time, they took the steps to develop a communication plan, communication process, such that together they resolved obstacles accordingly. And when it was all said and done, it saved time, it saved money. The doctors, the nurses, things of that nature were completely satisfied. They felt comfortable in the new solution. But overall, it improved patient care. So team, I want to share this simple example on how you could consider further improving your communication in projects today and going forward. What do you say? Let's now transition and continuously build upon the leadership, the relationships, the communication. Now let's talk about project quality. I love this cartoon. Our only option is to improve quality or hire more lawyers. And I think many of you would agree that, sad to say, quality is sometimes sacrificed to meet a schedule, to meet a deadline. So let's talk a little bit about some concepts of quality. I first want to share with you a gentleman by the name of Dr. Edwards Deming, who is considered to be the father of quality around the world. Dr. Demings really came to light shortly after, in the late 40s and 50s, starting in Japan and then working his way eventually into many countries, including the United States. But he has many books that he has written on quality. But some quotes that I thought were extremely important to those of us, say, that are project managers or work on a project. So, for example, the one I circled in yellow, quality should be everyone's responsibility. To strive for excellence rather than strive for perfection. If you strive for perfection, number one, you may never get there. And number two, you're going to be frustrated. And that frustration will disseminate across your team. The other one, in God we trust, all others bring the data. Now more than ever, data helps us make decisions, hopefully sound decisions, in a timely manner. Another quote that I thought was very, very applicable: without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So team, Dr. Edwards Deming, if some of you like myself are into, say, quality improvements, KPIs, key performance indicators, things of that nature, I think you'll enjoy some of his writings. So what is quality? According to Project Management Institute, it's a degree to which a set of inherent characteristics fulfill the requirements. Quality may imply perfection, but it's usually about ensuring consistency. And it's based on what customer or stakeholders need as a result of your project. And it emphasizes satisfaction and belief that quality leads to customer satisfaction. The point here, from a practical consideration, ensure your project at a minimum meets the wants and needs of the project set forth by the stakeholders. Pretty simple, yet very important. I list here some quality terms. I'm not going to go into the detail here, team, but obviously you want to make sure you validate, you verify. Okay? Hopefully you have a definable, repeatable, thus predictable type of process in place. But the overall consideration here from a practical standpoint, you want to make sure you update these in your project management plan and to ensure you follow, say, the corporate policies, whether they be of your company, of the company that you're serving. And if one doesn't exist, consider helping them to create one. It could really add tremendous value to them and to you. So practical considerations, I think you would agree, quality is in the eyes of the beholder. People could look at a particular painting, a particular picture, and have different conclusions. Those conclusions, are they real? Are they perceived? Are they qualitative? Are they quantitative? But you want to make sure when you're looking at quality and trying to get quantitative type of metrics, you want to establish some type of quality constraints, if you will, some standards. And as I said, sometimes quality is sacrificed to meet a particular tight deadline. But here's an interesting quote I want to share with you. Quality is not about giving the customer extras. Let me give you this. Let me give you that, which is often based on possible erroneous perceptions of what you believe the customer may want. In turn, these may add time or cost or impact other important things associated with your project, but do not always result in the customer feeling the value of what you tried to do. I want you to think about extras, quote unquote, and value from a customer perspective. When you look at quality, there's basically three types of process entities: the planning, the assurance, and the control, the monitoring and control, making sure you're within certain guidelines. So we'll talk about this now. Excuse me. I want to begin by looking at, from a PMI perspective, using quality management as an example. As you all probably know, there are 49 processes associated with the 10 project management knowledge areas. Each of those processes have a common look and feel in terms of input, tools and techniques, and outputs. So in this case, the planning, input, techniques, output. Assurance, the same, and quality control, the same. So this is just an at-a-glance summary I want to share with you from a standard PMI perspective. And this type of in, tools, techniques, and out is the same look and feel for each of the 49 processes. So let's take a moment and we'll talk about some of these. Here is an example of 3 quality concepts, starting with customer satisfaction. And customer satisfaction is typically what I like to call a balance, maybe of the end state of versus, say, the management on how the project unfolded. But very important here, team, if a customer doesn't feel the product produced by you and your project team met their needs, or if the way the project was orchestrated didn't meet their expectation, then the customer is more likely to consider the project quality as poor, regardless of what you, the project manager, or what you and your team think. Interesting point. So the practical consideration is to make sure the project requirements are met, are managed, and agreed upon by the customer. So to help do this, the second is this, what I call prevention over inspection. And on the left column, the cost of conforming versus the right column, the cost of not conforming. Preventing versus rework. Testing versus, sad to say, liability, lost business. Here's the point. The cost of preventing upfront, of trying to minimize, if not eliminate, mistakes, more often than not, is much lower than the cost of trying to correct them downstream in the project life cycle, or when the product is out in the field, say in production. Continuous improvement. I'm a big believer of continuous improvement, and it exists for all quality related approaches. Okay, how can we be better tomorrow than we are today, for example? And it's an ongoing effort. Process improvement is usually where you want to hone in on, and shortly I have a couple examples I'll share with you. And you want to analyze, you want to learn from lessons where issues arose. How did you encounter them? What did it take to correct them? And how can they be applied proactively so they don't happen again? So the goal is to avoid repeat issues. So this is an example of, say, simple process type of improvement and how to create, say, some type of quality metric. First of all, if you look in the middle under the current process, and what that's typically known as the as is, the current state, okay? And that current state, you want to be in what's called an improved process, the as desired state, let's call it. And then overall, you might combine these different processes to achieve an overall desired result. So in this case, it may involve business measures, it may involve customer measurements, it may involve process measurement improvement. But here's the key on this slide I want to emphasize. I think, and I truly believe all of you would agree, in my experience thus far, in project managers that I've worked with, in customers that I've worked with, in customer success managers that I've worked with, and customers accordingly, it is, sad to say, common for people to struggle with metrics. And that struggle is to say, what should I measure? How often should I measure it? And when I get a measurement, do I believe in it? The integrity of what's being measured. And oh, by the way, how does that measurement relate to what we're trying to improve? I want you to think about that. This is another example of what I call value add analysis for continuous improvement. And this example, team, looks at swim lanes, where Department 1 on top may have this work. Department 2 then takes that work and adds value. department 3, etc., such that going left to right, you go from a start point, let's call it, to a desired end state on the bottom right. So in this particular case, maybe green is a value add, where red may not add value. Maybe it's a hold time, a wait time of some sort. So when you look at, as I noted in the bottom boxes, the process time end to end is, say, 60 minutes. And this elapsed time overall that was given, let's say, is 300 minutes. Now you could start looking at some metrics in value add time, process efficiency time, and value add process efficiency. So it's a simple example where you could look at handoffs, you're leveraging swim lanes to look at a start, a finish, and continuous improvement throughout that process. This is another example, team, that I want to share with you in terms of how to report some type of chart. So if you look at the top left, it's some type of run chart, okay, where you have periodic points where you're measuring certain things, and then all of a sudden it goes below the red line, a process situation, okay, where that may be a red flag. Something in the process is not working as expected. Or at the bottom left, a Pareto chart, okay, Pareto principle. For many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences may come from 20% of the causes, the vital few. So where do you hone in on those top 20% to fix 80% of your problems, as an example? Then in the top left, a scatter plot where you could look at, say, accuracy of some type of metric. And in the bottom right, within, say, a top and a bottom variance level, where something from a variance at a particular measurement was out of compliance. Quality charts, examples to consider depending on your project. So, team, in just a few words, have any of you encountered difficulty in measuring quality, like I mentioned earlier? And if so, what was it that made it difficult? In the group chat window, I'd appreciate your thoughts, your experience. Did you encounter difficulty measuring quality? Take a few seconds in the group chat. I'd appreciate it. Anybody encountered difficulty when it came to quality measurements? Don't be bashful. Categorize quality issues consistently, DR goes on to say. Okay, very good. And I like the word categorize there. TM, I hear that over and over. We're horrible at tracking metrics. I could not agree more. And by the way, TM, just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's important. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir in saying that. Identifying bugs versus production issues. Yeah, that's very,